The Innocence Project gives a conservative estimate that there are over 20,000 innocent people currently locked away in U.S. prisons, convicted of crimes they did not commit. Unjust and Unsolved, a new true crime podcast from investigative journalist Maggie Freeling and the Obsessed Network, tells the stories of these people and these crimes. Maggie began the project by sending letters to people in prison whose stories haunted her, and she heard back from nearly all of them. They all wanted their stories to be heard. Each episode focuses on a single case. The stories are told through original interviews with the convicted person, their loved ones, lawyers, and advocates. Maggie examines the crimes, sharing all the evidence pointing away from the convicted person, and, in some instances, presenting the case for other suspects. Unjust and Unsolved is a compelling mix of investigative journalism and true crime storytelling. Find Unjust and Unsolved and all Obsessed Network podcasts wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to the Software Lifecycle Stories podcast. We bring you stories of what worked and sometimes what did not in the course of discovering, designing, developing, delivering, and using software-based solutions, as shared by practitioners who went through these situations. In this conversation, Chitra, my colleague and co-host, shares her experiences related to what she learned developing mission-critical systems, how playing basketball helped her appreciate goal-focused teamwork approaches, and helping other women making their voices heard. Listen on. Hi, Chitra. Welcome to this episode as a guest. You've also been interviewing me. All that happened. So this time it's your turn to be the guest.
Thank you, Shiv. It's a pleasure to be a guest on this show.
And like we normally do, we'll start with the guest introducing a self-introduction.
Okay, so I've been in the technology industry for about 21 years. And, my first exposure was in the space field of avionics. So I started my career as an avionics engineer, and I formally learned my first programming language, and that was Ada. This was part of, mission critical system that we were developing for Airbus at that point in time. So after that, I joined a product company and got my first exposure to file systems and operating systems, and worked extensively on the TCP/IP stack, and also understood a lot about firewalls as well as identity management. And after that, I joined a large data storage company. So in some sense, I think my career has been around a lot of infrastructure development. And for about 10 years, I was with that organization in various roles. I started life as a developer, and then I was part of a system test engineering group. And then I moved into management, engineering management, and later on took on a senior role in this last engineering organization that I worked with. I've also been an active sports person. I played basketball for about 14 years of my life. So that's had a very interesting influence in the way I've done things. And so after I was employed, I decided to start exploring, other things to do in life, and then worked for some time as a data analytics consultant. And after that, I did some work with, two friends in the space of product management consulting and digital transformation before I was associated with PM Power Consulting. So that is a short introduction about myself, Shiv.
Yeah, that's very nice, Chitra. So based on this, I have a lot of questions. We'll see how much we can squeeze into this episode.
Okay.
So the first is from working in mission critical applications. When you took on a testing role, did you find anything different in terms of how you were approaching it compared to, let's say, the other testers?
I don't I don't think I can compare myself with how other testers were approaching it. But what I found, I would say, easy in the transition was the attention to detail and thoroughness. So, for example, as a mission critical developer, there are a very fixed set of guidelines that you follow while writing code. For example, one of them is you cannot have more than one if loop in a particular function. Because we all know what happens when there are several if loops. It adds to the complexity of a program. And also, when you pay attention to things like return values or how decimals are handled by a system, these were some of the points that I could carry with me when I made the transition from a developer to a systems test engineer. So in some sense, that was helpful to get started with. And, as a systems test engineer, you actually need to look at the entire system. So I think one change that I saw myself, transitioning from a developer to looking at an entire system was also getting an outside view in versus an inside view out. And in some sense, it was a lot more challenging because as a systems engineer, you actually have to look at several components working together, either with a high degree of compatibility and interoperability, so that your entire system is functioning the way it should. And also moving into systems engineering, I think some similarities that I can see between mission critical systems and system test engineering is they all, sort of have to guarantee a certain reliability and performance over a period of time that the system is live. So, for example, in an aircraft, you're working on a single component. Like one of the components that I was working on was a differential GPS-based landing system. And it was so important to understand that because when pilots...
The name makes it sound very complex. I said even the name differential GPS landing system makes it sound very complex.
Okay, so to put it very simply, when a pilot is landing an aircraft, right, in real time, the system has to give the pilot real-time information about the position of the aircraft relative to the landing strip. And this means knowing the position of the aircraft as it's coming into land by constantly, there are three parameters changing: latitude, longitude, and altitude, or height from the ground. This system was actually being developed to give that pilot a constant feed so that the pilot understands where the plane is relative to the landing strip. Also having that perspective of how a user is going to consume the system was helpful while designing it and developing it rather. So I think when that was something that I was able to take away when I transitioned into the role of a system test engineer is, how does what we are building matter eventually to the user who's going to use it?
Interesting. Getting the actual user perspective and the empathy for the user. That's something that I've been noticing many of the guests on the podcast also have been saying, that to be successful in terms of whatever you create, it's not only the technology, but also understanding the users. The other question that comes to my mind is you're mentioning that you were a basketball player. In basketball, by the way, Phil Jackson is one of my favorites, and I use some of the principles that he has in the book called 11 Rings, where he talks about the teaming and some of the MVPs who are also very highly individualistic kind of players. Okay, so you have done a lot of those things in terms of you played basketball, and you've also been in the management positions, senior management positions and all that. So was there something that you learned from basketball that helped you in managing some of these high performance or maybe sometimes the high maintenance individual contributors when you needed to deliver something as complex as file systems or operating systems uh, as a team?
Yeah, this is a really good question, Shiv. And actually, I was just thinking about this context as you were talking. It's probably the first time somebody's asked me this question. And I can actually sense a lot of responses, coming to my mind. So let me start with, Phil Jackson. I think when I started seeing Phil Jackson, it was a point in time where NBA matches used to be telecast at some really strange hour of the night in our time zone. So we used to actually record the matches on a VCR and watch them later. But one thing that I remember vividly is the fact that this person actually was encouraging everybody in the Chicago Bulls team to play, and I think that was a hard thing for him to do, given that they had a star player all along in Michael Jordan. And that kind of star power is hard to contend with. But what you could really see through is the whole team coming together. And I think that playing basketball helped me realize that very early on. There are no heroes or heroines in the game, and it's a team sport. So there are times when, in the middle of the game, for some reason, the opposition begins to get a little more aggressive, and you're losing your rhythm, you're losing your footing. What it takes for the team to get back then is actually, begin to slowly recoup as a team. Don't see the scoreboard, don't pay attention to the time, but slowly find your rhythm. And all it takes is, maybe 2 consecutive shots for you to know that you're back in the game. And you can feel that on the court, especially in that kind of a sport where it happens so fast. So similarly, working in the tech industry, I think you're always working with extremely smart and brilliant people. And sometimes it's very hard for, that kind of brilliance to understand teamwork and sort of gel with it. So, some of the instances I would try to use while having conversations with people, if they sort of, like I could have, very, very smart architects or senior engineers just wanting to go off and build an entire portion of the system all by themselves. Or leave it to me, I'll just do it end to end. And, even getting them to be part of reading a code or doing code reviews and helping others in the team come up to speed or gain that knowledge or discuss a design approach or a bug fix approach. That was more important to me, that the whole team understand that, and therefore everybody should be able to equally contribute to what's happening. So I would use these instances from games, and luckily I think most of the people here, one good thing is they follow cricket, and they definitely understand that India as a team always does better when every person in their team sort of plays their part and the whole team gels together. For whatever little I know of cricket, I'm able to see that. So although I couldn't use basketball as an analogy, I think using the ethos of a team sport was very helpful in managing these scientific and engineering temperaments in a team.
I guess, yeah, many of those people skills are transferable. And as we talk more and more about agile and teams being empowered, playing sport probably helps a lot in making the teams more productive.
Yes. In fact, there's one thing which comes to my mind. I actually started my sporting career as a tennis player.
Oh.
And yeah, so very soon I realized that I sort of didn't like being all by myself alone on the court. Although I've always enjoyed the physical drills of, keeping fit and running, training and exercises, somehow when the nice part of the tennis coaching was when you're doing all the drills together with the other kids. But when you're on the court, you're pretty much all alone. And I found myself liking to play, doubles matches with people and moving away from singles. So when I stepped onto a basketball court, I think that's the first thing that I felt that yes, there are people around me and we all play together. So that is something that I've also seen in my career, that I've always enjoyed working with people. And I strongly believe in the collective power of solving a problem and diversified thinking coming to the table. It's a philosophy that's beginning to realize that's carried me through my career.
Wonderful. Actually, one of the problems or areas that I have been thinking about for a very long time, and I think many organizations also face this, is that we try to recruit very smart students now who, because of the way the academics are designed, are pushed to perform individually, excel individually. But when they come into the corporate world, they need to work as a team. So
Yeah.
maybe whatever went through your own transformation could show some pointers in terms of how we could probably help corporates with that.
Absolutely. In fact, this is something that I've actually practiced and done quite often. I still remember when about 10 years ago, when I had to actually set up an engineering team from scratch, I was just given a bunch of resumes, and every name and college on that resume was a tier 1 category institution. And at the back of my mind, I knew that it was going to be hard because, like you said, people from such institutions, because the focus is on the individual and there is a lot of importance given to your ranking and standing, also bring a certain mindset to the workplace, which may not really fit in the kind of environment that I was working in. I mean, it may be applicable for, let's say, if somebody is looking for a breakthrough or an innovation kind of a mindset, but where it's more of again looking in the context of a customer issue, right? If I can take an example here, there is typically in the financial industry, which I also feel is a mission critical industry because they're serving millions and millions of customers, and there are millions more transactions going on in the backend to support those interactions for customers. The team supporting such a customer also needs to work as a team and not really individuals. So while recruiting also, I began to notice this, and luckily for me, there were some peers along with me who also noticed that it was actually hard to hire such people because they were always looking for the next coolest thing to work on or what's in it for me, which is not a bad thing, but that seemed to be predominant in the interviews. So we actually went up with a suggestion to senior management at that point in time, as well as the staffing department, and said, why don't we look at the local talent we have rather than going after only tier 1 colleges. And at that point in time, and even today, tier 1 colleges have the concept of day one. I mean, if you're not day one on their campus, then apparently you don't get the best pick. So I was always in my mind that, why can't we open up an opportunity to everybody and actually look for temperament and attitude along with technical skill? Look for slightly more well-rounded individuals, or individuals that could bring in very different perspectives to solve a problem, rather than only focus on skill or how smart they were at cracking an algorithm. So that I found brought in a lot of diversity to the teams that I was setting up or I worked with, and the discussions became a lot more interesting. And this also sort of helps to balance out people who come from, I'm not saying that people who come from all tier 1 organizations are like this, but I would look at it more in the context of adding diversity to the thinking and addressing the problems that we have on hand. So so I think talent can come from anywhere. And the question is, what is it that companies need to do while looking for that talent? I would say look at all dimensions, right? When you're in an interview, try and find out as much as you can about the person, apart from only what they have done in terms of their work. And I think that makes for hiring a better hire, in my experience.
Nice. That also, I think, gives me an idea of how we can segue into the next theme that we can spend the next few minutes over, which is women in IT. You mentioned a few things. You did mention diversity, and you also mentioned about the well-rounded personalities that are needed. And by nature, as well as probably their aptitude, in general, women are able to balance a lot of things at work, at home, their professional commitments, personal commitments, all that. And probably something like the operating system that you worked on, which does multi-threading, multitasking, everything else, being able to spin all these around and manage well. Now, what has been your experience in terms of either the work-life balance or how some of these things kind of been coming together?
Okay, it's interesting that you put a spin of an operating system, and now I'm thinking, yeah, actually, it's, I guess, for everybody it's just like that. There are multiple threads running, but if you realize that it's always a good practice to ensure that a thread completes and doesn't go into a zombie state or just hang there, which is what we'll end up seeing a lot of the time. But for me, I guess one thing is, I think I've grown up in a family where I always saw women around me working, as in my immediate close relatives, my mother, my grandmother, my aunt. I saw all of them sort of very seamlessly doing it. So to me, it never occurred that I couldn't do it. And eventually, when I started my career and got married, had a family, set up home, while you were just adding a lot of things on the plate, things seem to set into a rhythm. At this point, actually, I can just get one thought in my mind now, is very often the question that people ask me, and this is a question my children also ask me today, is, so how did you play basketball and study? I think I wanted to do both. Mm-hmm. So, it meant waking up an hour extra early in the morning. You had to be up at 5 a.m., practice for about an hour, get ready, go to school or college, come back, hit the courts again, finish your practice, come back, do homework, eat your dinner and go to bed. So some of the things people may, say that, did you have time for friends? Did you watch a lot of TV and stuff like that? I said, not much. But when I look back in retrospect, I don't think I missed them because my day was full. And I think that's what I also experience when I am, engaged with work and when I'm at home. So it could be, maybe I enjoy having people around in both places. So what I also realize is when I'm doing things for others, I think my mind is engaged and I don't stop to consider it as a balance. Yes, there are some definitely, stress points and pressure points where there are times when you feel that, everything is piling up at your head. And I think it's important to recognize those points, take a step back, take all the help you can get. It's absolutely not wrong to ask for help, and things will pass. So I guess this is how I've been looking at it. And yes, sometimes it's a decision that you take at that point in time. And I feel the important thing is not to go back and feel guilty or regret something that you didn't do. This is easier said than done, because there are times even today when I go back and I feel I'm either letting somebody down or because I couldn't complete something. But I think the important thing is, take a step back. It's okay. Sometimes too many things come your way and you can't manage it. Recoup. And also learn to be kind to yourself and accept that we are all human beings. And then go back and, give the best you can.
Oh, great thoughts. The last question, probably leading into many more episodes to follow, is that I don't know if it was coincidental or It was meant to be that way. That you said you started your career with Ada.
Okay.
And Ada Lovelace was being considered as the first programmer. And
Yes.
where you've been doing a lot in terms of the community of women in IT. And this idea that the next few episodes, we should focus on women in IT around International Women's Day. Would you like to share some thoughts around it for our listeners?
Yeah, definitely. So very often in the course of my work, I began coming across instances where many women engineers were sharing that in the course of meetings, team meetings where solutions to problems were being discussed, very often they'd have a solution in their mind, but never spoke up. Or if they did, the solution wasn't really accepted. So I began to encourage them to actually interrupt when it was appropriate and actually speak up with the solution and see how that went. So many women thereafter came back and said it actually worked. And there were other times when people started coming up to share some issues related to work as well as personal things, and how and asking for help on how these could be addressed in the work environment. So I found myself volunteering time towards mentoring them, or being a sounding board for some of their issues, so that they could discuss freely without being judged or biased. Another space that I found as an opportunity to help women in tech was a platform for women in tech organized by through an international conference. And that became a very fantastic networking platform for women to come and talk about the technology that they were working in through workshops, through presentations. I remember this one time we actually proposed the idea of women across product companies coming and demonstrating their product capabilities through a lab session, which became a dedicated part of the conference. Through one of such sessions, I remember that the company that I was then working with, we actually put up an entire rack of equipment demonstrating the capability of our hardware and software. And this was very well appreciated by the CTO of the company because it was something that had never been done before. And the entire thing was crafted and put together by the women engineers in the company. So this for me has been a way of giving back to the community. And I continue to look for opportunities to do so. And now I also see that it can be extended across industries. It doesn't have to only be the software or the technology industry at all.
That's good. So in the next few episodes, I'm hoping that our guests will also feel safe to share things that would be useful for the community.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, Chitra.
Thank you, Shiv. It was a great conversation. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And being a co-host, I'm sure we'll have more such conversations in the future.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. If you like the show and would like to share your experiences with the community, or know someone else who might want to do that, please get in touch with us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com. That is podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.
The Innocence Project gives a conservative estimate that there are over 20,000 innocent people currently locked away in U.S. prisons, convicted of crimes they did not commit. Unjust and Unsolved, a new true crime podcast from investigative journalist Maggie Freeling and the Obsessed Network, tells the stories of these people and these crimes. Maggie began the project by sending letters to people in prison whose stories haunted her, and she heard back from nearly all of them. They all wanted their stories to be heard. Each episode focuses on a single case. The stories are told through original interviews with the convicted person, their loved ones, lawyers, and advocates. Maggie examines the crimes, sharing all the evidence pointing away from the convicted person, and in some instances, presenting the case for other suspects. Unjust and Unsolved is a compelling mix of investigative journalism and true crime storytelling. Find Unjust and Unsolved and all Obsessed Network podcasts wherever you get your podcasts.